In September of 1982, the calm suburbs of Chicago were thrown into chaos by an invisible killer hidden inside of America's most trusted household products, Tylenol. What began as a few mysterious deaths would soon become one of the most chilling unsolved cases in American history, sparking nationwide panic, transforming drug safety forever, and leading to one of the largest FBI investigations of the decade. It started on the morning of September 28, 1982. 12-year-old Mary Kellerman from Elk Grove Village woke up with a sore throat. Her parents gave her one extra-strength Tylenol capsule before school. Within hours, she was dead. Doctors were baffled, unable to understand how a perfectly healthy child could collapse and die so suddenly. The next day, another young man, 27-year-old postal worker Adam Janus, also died after taking Tylenol for minor chest pain. His sudden death devastated his family, but the horror doubled when his brother Stanley and sister-in-law, Larissa, came to the house later that day, took pills from the same bottle, and both died shortly afterward. At first, these incidents seemed unrelated, a string of tragic coincidences, but then more people began dying across the Chicago area. 31-year-old Mary McFarland, 35-year-old flight attendant Paula Prince, and 27-year-old new mother Mary Reiner all took Tylenol from different bottles purchased at different stores. Within days, 7 people were dead. Panic spread as health officials noticed one critical link between every case. All the victims had taken extra-strength Tylenol capsules shortly before their deaths. When investigators examined the remaining capsules, they discovered the horrifying truth. Someone had laced them with potassium cyanide, a deadly poison that kills within minutes by suffocating the body from the inside, blocking cells from absorbing oxygen. Laboratory tests revealed that each capsule contained enough cyanide to kill several people. The odds of this happening accidentally were zero. Someone had deliberately opened these bottles, filled the capsules with poison, and returned them to store shelves for unsuspecting people to buy. The discovery sent shockwaves through the nation. The idea that anyone could die from taking a simple over-the-counter painkiller created a fear unlike anything America had ever seen. Hospitals, pharmacies, and grocery stores across the Chicago area immediately pulled Tylenol from their shelves. Local police, medical examiners, and toxicologists began working around the clock, trying to piece together how this had happened. A breakthrough came when a public health worker, investigating the Janus family deaths, retrieved the family's Tylenol bottle and brought it to the Cook County Medical Examiner's office. There, a toxicologist noticed the faint smell of bitter almonds, an unmistakable sign of cyanide. Within hours, public officials issued a warning urging everyone in Chicago to stop taking Tylenol. Johnson & Johnson, the company that made Tylenol, quickly announced a massive recall. At first, it covered the Chicago area, but when tainted bottles were found in other cities, the company recalled every bottle of Tylenol capsules nationwide. More than 31 million bottles were pulled from shelves, costing the company tens of millions of dollars. But for Johnson & Johnson, the priority was saving lives and restoring trust. Meanwhile, the investigation shifted from public health to criminal homicide. The scope and complexity of the case demanded more than local police could handle, so the FBI joined the investigation, forming a joint task force with the Illinois State Police, the Chicago Police Department, and several suburban departments. It became one of the largest multi-agency efforts of the decade. The FBI quickly determined that the contamination did not happen at the factory. The bottles that killed people came from 2 different manufacturing plants, one in Pennsylvania and one in Texas, and were distributed through various supply chains. That meant someone had tampered with the bottles after they had already been shipped to stores. This conclusion was both illuminating and terrifying. It suggested the killer had walked into ordinary stores, opened bottles on the shelves, inserted cyanide into some of the capsules, and put the bottles back for others to buy, all without being noticed. Agents chased thousands of leads. They interviewed store employees, pharmacists, and delivery drivers. They examined return slips, traced lot numbers, and followed reports of suspicious behavior, anyone seen handling bottles or buying Tylenol in large quantities. But it was 1982, long before widespread surveillance cameras or digital tracking. There was no footage, no fingerprints, and no witnesses. Every lead eventually led nowhere. The killer had seemingly vanished without leaving a trace. Then, a strange letter appeared at Johnson & Johnson headquarters. It was typed and postmarked from Chicago, signed Robert Richardson. The author claimed responsibility for the poisonings and demanded $1 million to stop the killing. The letter contained specific details about the poisonings that had not been released to the public, convincing investigators that the writer either knew the killer or was the killer. The FBI traced the letter to a man named James William Lewis. Lewis had a history of fraud and had once been wanted for a check-keating scheme. When agents searched his home, they found typewritten drafts of extortion letters, documents referencing cyanide, and other incriminating materials. When arrested, Lewis admitted writing the extortion letter but denied having anything to do with the actual murders. He claimed he only wanted to draw attention to a former employer who owed him money, framing the letter as a misguided attempt at revenge rather than genuine responsibility. Despite the damning circumstantial evidence, investigators could find nothing linking directly to the poison bottles. No fingerprints, no DNA, no cyanide, no eyewitnesses. Without hard proof, prosecutors could not charge him with murder. Instead, he was convicted of extortion and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. He served his time and was released, remaining the prime suspect in public opinion, but never formally charged with the killings. For the FBI, the investigation continued. Over the following years, they re-examined every piece of evidence. They tested old bottles, re-interviewed witnesses, and reviewed every extortion-related lead. Still, no physical connection ever emerged between Lewis and the actual tampering. By the 2000s, as forensic science advanced, investigators reopened the case again, hoping that modern DNA testing might uncover something new. Old evidence was resubmitted, but even with updated methods, no match was ever found. The case remains one of the most perplexing in FBI history. There was motive, means, and opportunity, but no proof. The killer seemed to have committed the perfect anonymous crime. It was possible, investigators speculated, that the person responsible was someone who simply wanted to create chaos, someone who sought to test the limits of fear itself. Others believed it might have been an act of revenge against the company or a random display of psychopathy. The truth, nobody knew. Despite the lack of resolution, the Tylenol murders changed America forever. Within weeks of the tragedy, Johnson & Johnson introduced the first tamper-evident packaging system for over-the-counter drugs. Bottles were sealed with foil, plastic shrink wrap, and glued boxes so that customers could immediately tell if a product had been opened. The U.S. Congress soon passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act, making it a serious federal crime to alter or contaminate consumer products. Capsules, which could easily be opened and refilled, were largely replaced by solid tablets and caplets. The company's quick and transparent response actually saved its reputation. Instead of hiding the issue, Johnson & Johnson warned the public, recalled all products, cooperated with investigators, and redesigned its packaging. Within a year, Tylenol had regained most of its market share. It became a textbook example of how to handle a corporate crisis with integrity. Meanwhile, law enforcement never gave up. The FBI kept the case open, revisiting it periodically with new technology. In 2007, a new task force re-examined evidence, and in 2011, investigators even looked into possible connections to other criminals, including Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. The FBI requested Kaczynski's DNA for comparison, but he denied involvement and refused to cooperate. Once again, the case went cold. As decades passed, the story of the Tylenol murders became both a mystery and a cautionary tale. It revealed the vulnerabilities of consumer trust, the limitations of forensic science in the early 1980s, and the terrifying idea that someone could kill random strangers without leaving a trace. Even after thousands of interviews, hundreds of leads, and years of investigation, no one has ever been charged with the murders. James W. Lewis, the only person ever connected to the case through his extortion letter, maintained his innocence until his death in 2023 at the age of 76. To this day, the FBI still considers the case open. Files remain classified, and investigators occasionally revisit the evidence, hoping that one final test might reveal the truth. What makes this case especially haunting is how ordinary the victims were: children, parents, working adults, all killed by something that should have been harmless. It destroyed the illusion of safety in the most mundane act imaginable: swallowing a painkiller. The Tylenol murders reshaped the way Americans view consumer safety and corporate responsibility. It led to innovations in packaging that are now taken for granted, created new federal laws, and changed how companies respond to crises. Yet for all its influence, the case stands as an unsolved tragedy. 7 people lost their lives in a senseless act of tampering, and the person responsible vanished without consequence. 4 decades later, the name Tylenol murders still sends a chill down the spine. It is a reminder of how fragile trust can be and how one anonymous act of malice can alter the behavior of an entire nation. The FBI's case remains open, its files thick with unanswered questions. Somewhere in those pages may lie the final clue that could solve one of the most infamous mysteries of the 20th century. Until then, the story of the Tylenol murders remains not just a tale of crime, but a grim reflection of how fear, trust, and safety can be forever changed by a single, invisible hand.